For 300 years, the Galactic Federation watched the small blue planet from a safe distance. They had rules about places like Earth. They called such worlds death worlds because everything there wanted to kill everything else. The gravity was too strong, the weather was too violent, the diseases were too deadly, and the creatures that lived there were too dangerous. Humans were the most dangerous of all. The Federation had decided long ago to leave Earth alone. They put warning beacons around the solar system. They told all civilized species to stay away. They hoped that if they ignored the humans long enough, the humans would never become a problem. They were wrong. Humans learned to travel between stars on their own. They built ships that were faster and stronger than anyone expected. They created weapons that made Federation scientists lose sleep at night, and while other species built trading vessels and passenger liners, humans built warships, lots of warships. Admiral Park Do-hyun had commanded the United Earth Defense Fleet for 15 years. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. His flagship was called the Unyielding, and it was the largest warship humanity had ever built. 3 kilometers long, armed with weapons that could crack a planet, crewed by 5,000 men and women who had trained their whole lives for a war that never came. Park stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars. Earth floated behind him, blue and green and beautiful. He had spent his entire career protecting that world from threats that never arrived. The Federation was too scared to attack. Other species avoided human space like it was cursed. Sometimes Park wondered if all his preparation had been for nothing. Then the signal came. Lieutenant Commander Yoon Jia was the first to detect it. She was the fleet's chief communications officer, a young woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. When her console started beeping with an unknown transmission, she thought it was a mistake at first. No one ever sent messages to Earth. No one wanted to talk to the Deathworlders. But this signal was different. It was desperate. It was afraid. And it was begging for help. Jia worked through the night to decode the message. It came from a star system called Velith, over 200 light-years away. The species who sent it called themselves the Marathi. They were a peaceful people who had never harmed anyone. They had lived quietly on their world for thousands of years, building beautiful cities and creating wonderful art. Now they were dying. An empire called the Keth Dominion had come to their world. The Keth were conquerors. They had already destroyed 17 other civilizations. They did not want resources or territory. They simply wanted to kill. They believed that only the strong deserved to exist, and they proved their strength by wiping out anyone weaker than themselves. The Marathi had tried everything. They had begged the Galactic Federation for help. They had pleaded with the council races. They had offered everything they had in exchange for protection. Everyone had said no. The Keth were too powerful. The risk was too great. The Marathi would have to save themselves. But the Marathi could not fight. They had no army. They had no warships. They had nothing but hope, and that hope was fading fast. In their desperation, they had done something unthinkable. They had sent a message to Earth. They had asked the Deathworlders for help. Jia brought the decoded transmission to Admiral Park at 3 a.m. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. She was angry. The message included video footage from Marathi Prime, and what she had seen would haunt her forever. Park watched the footage in silence. He saw cities burning. He saw families running through streets filled with smoke and fire. He saw children crying for parents who would never come. He saw Keth soldiers laughing as they hunted innocent people like animals. When the footage ended, Park did not move for a long time. The bridge was quiet. Everyone was watching him, waiting to see what he would do. "How long?" Park finally asked. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous underneath it. "How long until the Keth finish what they started?" Navigation Officer Baek Sunho checked his calculations. He was a young man, barely 30, but he was the best navigator in the fleet. At their current pace, approximately 6 weeks, maybe less. 6 weeks. 6 weeks until an entire species was erased from existence. 6 weeks until millions of innocent lives were snuffed out like candles in the wind. Park turned to face his crew. These were good people. They had families back on Earth. They had hopes and dreams and futures. If he gave the order he was considering, some of them might not come home. But he thought about those Marathi children. He thought about their screams. He thought about how the entire galaxy had turned its back on them. And he thought about what kind of species humanity wanted to be. "Contact Fleet Command," Park ordered. His voice was steady now, filled with purpose. "Tell them to wake the War Council. I want every admiral, every general, every political leader online within 6 hours." Gia's eyes widened. "Sir, are we really going to—" "Someone asked for help," Park said quietly. "For 300 years the galaxy has been afraid of us. They have called us monsters. They have treated us like dangerous animals. Maybe it is time we showed them what we really are." He looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, a species was dying. Somewhere out there, children were crying, and no one was coming to save them. No one except the Deathworlders. "We are going to answer that call," Admiral Park said, "and the Keth are going to learn why the galaxy fears Earth." The bridge erupted into action. Officers ran to their stations. Communications channels buzzed with urgent messages. The great engines of the unyielding hummed as the ship prepared for something it had never done before. For 300 years, humanity had waited. They had trained. They had built their weapons and sharpened their skills. They had prepared for a war that never came. Now the war had found them, and they were ready. The Deathworlders were coming. The War Council of Earth met in a secret chamber beneath the city of Geneva. It was a round room carved from solid rock, designed to survive anything short of a direct nuclear strike. 112 representatives from every nation on Earth sat in a circle, their faces lit by the soft glow of holographic displays. Secretary General Huang Yunji stood at the center of the chamber. She was 48 years old, the youngest person ever to hold her position. She had been elected on promises of peace and careful expansion. She had never expected to face a decision like this. The holographic displays showed the Marathi's dying world. Cities burned. Bodies filled the streets. The screams of the dying echoed through speakers that made everything feel too real. When the footage ended, the chamber was silent. Then everyone started talking at once. "This is not our fight," shouted Representative Volkov from the Eastern Coalition. He was a big man with a loud voice and strong opinions. "We have no treaty with these Marathi, no trade agreements. Why should our soldiers die for strangers?" "Because no one else will help them," replied Admiral Park. He attended the meeting through a hologram, his image flickering slightly as he spoke from his ship far above Earth. "The Federation abandoned them. The Council races refused. If we do nothing, they die. All of them, every man, woman, and child. And if we do something, our people might die instead," Volkov shot back. "Is that better? Trading human lives for alien ones?" The argument spread like fire through the chamber. Representatives shouted at each other across the room. Some demanded immediate action. Others wanted to stay far away from the conflict. A few suggested making deals with the Marathi, offering help only in exchange for their technology or their resources. Secretary General Huang let them argue for almost an hour. Then she raised her hand, and slowly the chamber fell quiet. "Dr. Kang," Huang said, turning to a woman who sat near the edge of the circle. "You have studied the Keth for many years. Tell us what you know." Dr. Kang Mirai was Earth's leading expert on alien civilizations. She was 53 years old, with calm eyes and a voice that commanded attention. She had spent 15 years studying the Keth Dominion, reading their transmissions, analyzing their behavior, trying to understand how they thought. She stood slowly and looked around the chamber. "The Keth do not negotiate," she said. "They do not make peace. They do not stop. In the past 200 years, they have destroyed 17 civilizations. Some of those species tried to surrender. The Keth killed them anyway. Some tried to run. The Keth hunted them down. Some tried to fight. The Keth crushed them." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The Keth believe that the universe belongs to the strong. They prove their strength by destroying the weak. Right now, the Marathi are their target. But when the Marathi are gone, the Keth will choose another victim, and another. And eventually, they will look at Earth." Representative Volkov frowned. "Are you saying we should start a war to prevent a war?" "I am saying that this war is coming whether we want it or not. The only question is whether we fight it on our terms or theirs. Whether we fight it with allies or alone." The chamber fell silent again. Dr. Kang's words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Admiral Park spoke next, his holographic image standing tall and steady. "I have served in the defense fleet for 40 years, he said. "I have spent my entire life preparing to protect Earth. But I did not become a soldier to watch innocent people die from a safe distance. I became a soldier because some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth dying for." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. "The Marathi reached out to us because they had no one else. Every other civilization in the galaxy was too afraid to help. Only us. Only the Deathworlders." He paused. "What does it say about humanity if we turn away too? What does it say about everything we believe in?" Secretary General Huang nodded slowly. She had listened to all the arguments. She had heard the fear and the anger and the doubt. Now it was time to decide. "We will vote," she announced. "The question is simple. Do we answer the Marathi's call for help? Do we send our fleet to fight the Keth Dominion?" The voting was electronic, anonymous, and instant. Representatives pressed buttons on their consoles, making choices that would change the future of humanity. The results appeared on the central display. 67 in favor, 45 against. Earth would go to war. Huang felt the weight of the decision settle onto her shoulders. She knew that some of the men and women who would fly to the Velith system would not come back. She knew that families would be broken and lives would be lost. But she also knew that sometimes doing the right thing came with a terrible price, and refusing to pay that price was worse than paying it. "Admiral Park," she said formally, "you have authorization to deploy the defense fleet. Rescue the Marathi, stop the Keth, and bring our people home." Park saluted through the hologram. "Yes, Secretary General." As the meeting ended and the representatives filed out of the chamber, Huang remained behind. She stared at the holographic images of the burning Marathi cities, watching the smoke rise from ruined buildings. Commander Han Taiyang stood beside Admiral Park on the bridge of the Unyielding. He was Park's executive officer, a decorated veteran who had served in the fleet for 20 years. When word of the vote arrived, he turned to his admiral with a question in his eyes. "Sir, the crew is asking what we are fighting for. What should I tell them?" Park considered the question carefully. He thought about the 300 years humanity had spent isolated and feared. He thought about the stories other species told about Earth, the nightmares they had about human soldiers, the terror they felt at the very mention of the death world. "Tell them the truth," Park said finally. "Someone called for help. Everyone else was too afraid to answer. But we are not afraid. We are human, and this is what we do." The fleet began its final preparations. In 48 hours, they would leave Earth behind and travel across the stars to fight a war for a species they had never met. They did not know if they would win. They did not know if they would survive. But they knew they were doing the right thing. And for the Deathworlders, that was enough. Commander Reth of the Keth Dominion stood on the bridge of his warship and smiled. Below him, the planet Merathi Prime burned beautifully. Smoke rose from 100 cities. Fires spread across continents. His ground forces were doing excellent work. Reth had conquered 9 worlds before this one. He knew exactly how to break a civilization. First, destroy the cities. Then hunt down the survivors. Make sure no one escapes. Make sure no one remembers. The Merathi had been easy prey. They had no weapons. They had no army. They had spent thousands of years creating art and music instead of building warships. Now they were learning the price of weakness. Reth's fleet numbered 47 vessels, warships with powerful weapons and thick armor, troop carriers filled with soldiers ready to finish the cleansing, support vessels loaded with supplies for a long campaign. It was more than enough to destroy one peaceful world. His sensor officer suddenly made a strange sound, something between confusion and fear. "Commander," the officer said, "we are detecting gravity signatures at the edge of the system." Reth frowned. "Explain." 17 vessels have just exited hyperspace. They are approaching our position." "Federation ships?" "No, Commander. The signatures do not match any known Federation vessel." The officer paused, checking his readings again. "They do not match anything in our database." Before Reth could respond, his communications console began receiving a transmission. It was broadcast on all frequencies, powerful enough to reach every ship in the system. A voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. It was calm, steady, and absolutely without fear. "This is Admiral Park Do-hyun of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You are attacking a peaceful world. You are killing innocent people. You will stop all military operations immediately. You will leave this system. You will surrender your commanding officers to face justice. You have 1 hour to comply. There will be no further warnings." For a moment, the bridge was completely silent. Then Reth began to laugh. "Humans," he said, shaking his head. "The Deathworlders have finally left their hole. 17 ships against 47? They are as stupid as the stories say." He opened a channel to his fleet. "All vessels, form attack pattern. Destroy the human ships. Show them why the Keth rule the stars." The Keth Armada moved like a well-trained predator. 47 warships spread into a wide formation, weapons charging, shields activating. They had fought dozens of species across 17 systems. They had never lost a battle. They had also never fought Deathworlders. Admiral Park watched the Keth fleet approach on his tactical display. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes seeing everything. "They are not slowing down," reported Commander Han Tae-yang. "They are going to attack." "I know," Park said quietly. "I gave them a chance. That is more than they gave the Merathi." He turned to his weapons officer, a young woman named Choi Yuna. She was 31 years old and had never fired a shot in real combat. But she had trained for this moment every day of her adult life. "Lieutenant Choi," Park said, "you may fire when ready." Yuna took a deep breath. Her fingers moved across her console with practiced precision. Neural links connected her mind directly to the ship's targeting systems, allowing her to process information faster than any unaugmented being could manage. "All batteries," she announced. "Firing!" The unyielding roared. Humanity had never fought a space battle before. They had spent 3 centuries preparing for one, building weapons based on theories and simulations and endless training exercises. No one knew for certain if their technology would work against real enemies. It worked. Human weapons were different from anything the Keth had ever encountered. While most species used energy weapons, lasers and plasma that could be deflected by shields, humans used kinetic accelerators. They fired simple metal projectiles at unbelievable speeds. The projectiles were not much larger than a human fist, but they moved so fast that each one carried the destructive power of a nuclear bomb. Keth shields were designed to absorb energy. They were useless against solid objects moving at a fraction of the speed of light. The first Keth ship exploded before its crew even understood what was happening. Then the second. Then the third. Human projectiles tore through shields like they were not there. They punched through armor that had stopped every other weapon. They turned proud warships into expanding clouds of debris. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Commander Reth watched in horror as his fleet was destroyed around him. Ships he had served with for years vanished in flashes of fire. Crews he had trained with died in instants. Everything he believed about warfare, about strength, about the natural order of the universe, was being proven wrong. His own flagship shook as a projectile ripped through its engine section. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. Officers shouted reports about hull breaches and power failures and casualties. "Commander," his first officer gasped, "what do we do?" Reth had no answer. In all his years of conquest, he had never needed to answer that question. He had always been the hunter, never the hunted. He had always won. A human voice came through his communication system again. The same calm, steady voice as before. "Keth vessel, your fleet has been destroyed. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Resist and you will be killed. This is your only warning." Reth wanted to fight. Every part of his being screamed at him to die with honor, to prove his strength even in defeat. But he looked around at his dying ship, at his wounded crew, at the wreckage that had once been the mightiest fleet in the sector. "Lower shields," he whispered. "Do as they say." When human soldiers boarded his ship, Reth finally saw the Deathworlders up close. They were smaller than Keith, shorter and less physically imposing. But there was something in their eyes that made his blood run cold. Something ancient and primal and terrifying. These were predators. True predators. Evolution had shaped them on a world so dangerous that only the most deadly creatures could survive. And they had not just survived. They had conquered their entire planet. They had tamed their deadly world and made it their home. Reth was dragged to the bridge of the unyielding in restraints. Admiral Park stood waiting for him, surrounded by his officers. The human looked tired but satisfied. "What are you?" Reth asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Park studied his prisoner for a long moment before answering. "We are the answer," he said simply, "to every cry for help that went unanswered, to every species that died alone because no one would fight for them. We are what happens when monsters like you finally meet something that is not afraid." He turned away, dismissing Reth from his attention. "Take him to the brig, and begin rescue operations on the planet below. The Mirathi have suffered enough." As Reth was led away, he finally understood why the galaxy had been so afraid of Earth. It was not because humans were violent. It was not because they were strong. It was because when humans decided to protect something, nothing in the universe could stop them. The news spread across the galaxy like a fire through dry grass. The Deathworlders had left Earth. They had destroyed a Keth fleet. They had done in 11 minutes what no other species had ever managed to do at all. Everyone was talking about the Battle of Mirathi Prime. Every species, every world, every space station buzzed with the same incredible story. The humans had come out of hiding, and they were terrifying. The Galactic Federation called an emergency meeting. For 300 years, they had pretended Earth did not exist. They had put up warning signs and looked the other way. Now they could not ignore humanity any longer. Ambassador Im Sujin was chosen to represent Earth at the Federation Council. She was 52 years old, a career diplomat who had spent decades preparing for a moment that everyone told her would never come. Now she walked through the corridors of Federation Central, the first human to ever set foot on the massive space station. The station was beautiful. Crystal towers rose toward artificial skies. Gardens filled with plants from 100 worlds bloomed in every direction. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors, going about their business. But when Im walked past, they all stopped. They stared. They whispered to each other and pointed at the Deathworlder in their midst. Im kept her head high and her pace steady. She had expected this reaction. She had prepared for it. The council chamber was enormous. 12 curved seats rose in a semicircle, each one occupied by a representative of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. These were the beings who made the rules. These were the species who decided what was right and what was wrong. And they were not happy with Earth. High Counselor Veth of the Dominari spoke first. He was an ancient being. His body more machine than organic, his voice booming through speakers built into his throne. "You have violated 17 treaties," Veth declared. "You attacked a sovereign power without authorization. You have destabilized the entire Outer Rim. What do you have to say for yourself, human?" Im stood alone before the council. She had no allies here, no friends, no one who would speak in her defense. She was one human against the combined might of galactic civilization. She smiled. "High Counselor," she said, her voice calm and clear, "the Keth Dominion was committing genocide. They were killing every man, woman, and child on Marathi Prime. The Marathi begged you for help. They begged all of you. And what did you do?" She paused, looking at each council member in turn. "You did nothing. You sat in your beautiful chamber and made excuses. The Keth were too strong. The risk was too great. The Marathi were not important enough to save." "You had no authority," another counselor began. "We had the authority of anyone who sees suffering and chooses to act," Im interrupted. "We had the authority of basic decency, something this council seems to have forgotten." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Councilors shouted accusations and demands. Some called for Earth to be punished. Others called for the humans to be quarantined even more strictly than before. Im waited for the noise to die down. Then she spoke again. "For 300 years, you have called us monsters. You have warned each other about the dangerous Deathworlders. You have told stories about how violent and terrible we are." She paused. "But when an entire species was being murdered, we were the only ones who tried to help. What does that make you?" The council had no answer. While Im faced the politicians, other humans were doing the real work. On Marathi Prime, relief ships had landed in what remained of the major cities. Soldiers had become rescuers. Warships had become hospitals. Medical officer Shin Ha-Yung led a team through the ruins of a city called Valith. The buildings around her had been beautiful once. Now they were broken shells, blackened by fire and scarred by weapons fire. Bodies lay in the streets. The smell of death was everywhere, but there were survivors. Ha-Yung found them hiding in basements and collapsed buildings. Marathi families who had somehow escaped the Keth soldiers. Children who had lost their parents. Old ones who had lost everything. She had trained for battlefield medicine. She had learned how to treat wounds and save lives under the worst conditions. But nothing had prepared her for this. A young Marathi child approached her as she worked. The child was thin, too thin, with huge eyes that had seen too much horror. In her hands, she clutched a torn piece of cloth that might have been a toy once. Through a translator device, the child asked a simple question. "Why did you come?" Ha-Yung stopped what she was doing. She knelt down so she could look the child in the eyes. She thought about all the reasons she could give. The political calculations, the strategic value, the debate in the War Council. But those were not the real reasons. Those were just words people used to justify what their hearts already knew was right. "Because you needed us," Ha-Yung said softly. "And that is enough." The child did not say anything. She just stepped forward and wrapped her thin arms around Ha-Yung's neck. Ha-Yung held her carefully, aware of how fragile she felt, how close to breaking. In that moment, she understood why humans had come to this place. Not for glory, not for power, not for any political advantage. They had come because someone had asked for help, and humans could not ignore that call. Back on the Unyielding, Admiral Park received regular reports from the surface. The situation was terrible. Millions of Marathi had died. The survivors were traumatized and starving. Their civilization had been nearly destroyed. But they were alive. Because of humanity, they were alive. Park looked out at the stars and thought about what came next. The Keth Dominion would not accept this defeat quietly. They would want revenge. They would gather their forces and come for Earth. War was coming. Real war. Not an 11-minute battle against an unprepared enemy. A long, bloody conflict that would cost countless lives. But Park did not regret his decision. He remembered the footage of Marathi children screaming for their parents. He remembered the silence of the Federation, the cowardice of the council races, the way the entire galaxy had turned its back on the innocent. Someone had to stand up. Someone had to fight. And if that someone had to be the Deathworlders, so be it. He turned to Commander Han Tae-yang, who stood at his usual position on the bridge. "Begin preparations for the fleet's return to Earth," Park ordered. "We have won a battle, but the war is just beginning." Tae-yang nodded. "Yes, Admiral. And, sir?" "The crew wanted me to tell you something." "What is that?" Tae-yang smiled slightly. "They are proud to serve under your command. They are proud to be human today." Park felt something warm in his chest. Pride, perhaps, or hope. "Tell them the feeling is mutual," he said. "Now get us home. We have work to do." The fleet began its journey back to Earth. Behind them, they left a world that was broken but alive, a species that had been saved by strangers from across the stars. And ahead of them, the Keth were already planning their revenge. The Keth Dominion had not been idle. Reports came in from across the Outer Rim. Every Keth ship, every soldier, every weapon was being gathered. Client species who owed the Keth favors were being called to service. An armada was forming, larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And it was coming for Earth. Supreme Commander Vorn stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, and reviewed his forces. 2,300 warships. 17 species united under Keth command. Millions of soldiers ready to die for the glory of the Dominion. The Deathworlders had humiliated the Keth at Marathi Prime. They had killed Commander Reth's fleet in 11 minutes. They had made the greatest warrior civilization in the galaxy look weak. That insult would be paid in blood. Earth would burn. Every human would die. The galaxy would learn once again that the Keth could not be challenged. Vorn gave the order, and his massive armada entered hyperspace. Destination: the solar system of the Deathworlders. Admiral Park Do-hyun had not wasted the 6 months since Marathi Prime. He had known this day was coming. He had prepared for it. The United Earth Defense Fleet had grown. 300 warships now orbited Earth, crewed by men and women who knew exactly what they were fighting for. Their weapons had been upgraded. Their tactics had been refined. They were ready. But they were not alone. The Marathi had rebuilt faster than anyone expected. They had no warships of their own, but they had something more valuable: determination. When they learned that the Keth were coming for Earth, they volunteered to help. Engineers and scientists who had survived the genocide worked alongside human technicians. Marathi cruisers, built with human assistance, joined the defensive fleet. And they were not the only ones. Word had spread about what humanity had done. Other species, long oppressed by the Keth, had heard the story of Marathi Prime. They had seen the Deathworlders stand up against evil when no one else would. And something changed in them. Ships began arriving at Earth from across the Outer Rim. Small vessels crewed by species the Federation had abandoned. Refugees from worlds the Keth had destroyed. People who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. They came because humanity had given them something rare: hope. When the Keth Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, they found the Deathworlders waiting for them. Not just humans now, but a true alliance. 300 human warships, 50 Marathi cruisers, almost 100 vessels from a dozen other species. It was still not enough. The Keth outnumbered them almost 4-1, but numbers were not everything. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Unyielding and studied the enemy fleet on his tactical display. 2,300 ships, more than he had ever faced, more than any human had ever faced. Commander Han Taeyang spoke quietly beside him. "They are not here to negotiate, Admiral. They are here to destroy us." "I know," Park replied. "Open a channel, all frequencies." Communications Officer Yoon Jia made the connection. Park's voice carried across the void, reaching every ship in both fleets. "Keth Dominion Forces, this is Admiral Park Do-Yun of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You have entered human space with hostile intent. You may still withdraw. Take this opportunity." The response came from Supreme Commander Vorn himself. The Keth leader's voice dripped with contempt. "You killed our brothers. You humiliated our dominion. There will be no retreat. There will be no mercy. When this day ends, Earth will be nothing but ash." Park nodded slowly. He had expected this answer. He had hoped for it, in a way. Some enemies could be reasoned with, others could only be stopped. "All ships," he ordered, "engage." The Battle of Saul began. Human vessels moved with impossible speed and precision. Crews that had trained their entire lives finally put that training to use. Weapons that had been built for exactly this moment fired with devastating accuracy. But the Keth had learned from Marathi Prime. Their new shields were stronger. Their formations were more flexible. They did not simply charge forward like they had before. They fought smart. The battle lasted 4 hours. Weapons Officer Choi Yuna coordinated fire across multiple battle groups. Her neural link allowed her to process targeting data faster than any normal human could manage. She watched ships explode on both sides. She saw friends die. She kept fighting. Medical Officer Shin Hyung worked in the Unyielding's trauma bay, treating wounded soldiers as they were brought in. The injuries were terrible. The flow of patients never stopped. She saved as many as she could and mourned the ones she could not. Dr. Kang Mirai monitored the battle from Earth's command center, her predictions about Keth behavior proving accurate again and again. Ambassador Im Soo-jin watched from the Federation Council chambers, where representatives who had once condemned humanity now stared in terrified fascination. The turning point came 3 hours into the battle. A Marathi captain named Vel, whose entire family had died at the hands of the Keth, made a decision. His ship was damaged, barely functional, unable to fight effectively. He could have retreated. No one would have blamed him. Instead, he accelerated directly toward the Destroyer of Worlds, the Keth flagship. His crew knew what he was planning. They could have stopped him. They chose to help. The collision destroyed both ships instantly. Supreme Commander Vorn died in fire, his grand plans for revenge dying with him. The Keth fleet, suddenly without leadership, began to fall apart. Admiral Park did not waste the opportunity. He ordered a full offensive. Human ships pushed forward. Allied vessels followed. The Keth, confused and leaderless, broke and ran. When it was over, 1,400 Keth ships had been destroyed. 300 had surrendered. The rest scattered across the galaxy, fleeing the Deathworlders who had broken their power forever. Human losses were significant. 87 ships destroyed, thousands dead, families that would never be whole again. But Earth survived. Humanity survived. And the alliance they had built survived with them. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Unyielding and looked out at the wreckage that drifted through space. Somewhere in that debris were people he had known, friends he had served with, young men and women who had given their lives for something greater than themselves. "Begin rescue operations," he ordered quietly. Any survivors from any ship are to be treated as patients and prisoners of war. Commander Han Taeyang hesitated. Even the Keth, sir? Even the Keth. Park turned from the viewport. We did not fight this war to become monsters, Commander. We fought it because we are supposed to be better than them. That does not change just because we won. 1 year later, the Galactic Federation formally lifted its quarantine of Earth. Humanity took its seat on the Council of Species, not as conquerors, but as protectors. The Marathi rebuilt their world with human assistance. Other species joined the new alliance. The galaxy was changing, and Earth stood at the center of that change. Admiral Park retired from active service, passing command of the fleet to Han Taeyang. At the ceremony, a reporter asked him what humanity's role in the galaxy would be. Park thought about the signal that had started everything, a desperate cry from a dying world, a call for help that no one else had answered. The same as it has always been, he said. When someone asks for help, we answer. When something threatens the innocent, we stop it. Not because we are Deathworlders, because we are human. Across the galaxy, those who had once lived in fear learned to hope. The Deathworld had become a sanctuary. The predators had become protectors. And when someone called for help, the humans always answered. Always.